good morning. I am Atira, the host for today. Welcome to our weekly Facebook and YouTube Live. Do follow us on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, and as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel, Capital Dynamics, as well as hit the notification bell to receive any updates on all of our most recent YouTube videos. Do check it out. Before we get straight to the topics, if you have any questions, comments, and if you want to share your thoughts on our discussion today, feel free to comment down below. And today, with me, our fund manager, as well as our speaker for today, Tengbu. Welcome, Tengbu. How are
Yeah,
you feeling today?
always the same. Every Saturday is always a very funny kind of day. It's not like Monday,
Yeah.
where you got the whole week ahead. And we know that most other companies in Malaysia don't work on Saturday, whereas Capital Dynamics work on Saturday. So I feel a bit strange. I feel that uh, happy in a way that we are the only ones working on Saturday, and feel sad that we have to work on Saturday.
Okay, so for today's topic, it is the Malaysia stock market outlook after the 2023 budget. As the 2023 budget is likely to determine the direction of stock market, it will be exciting to discover Malaysia's stock market outlook after the 2023 budget. What can we expect from this year's Malaysia economy? Is the budget too good to be true or is it realistic? Tengfu, what do you think about this?
Okay, you ask very difficult questions, Atira. Uh, yeah, I mean, seriously, those are very difficult questions. Is the budget too good to be true? Is the
Yeah.
budget good? Eh, okay, I think first thing is I got to start with the basic, right?
Yeah.
A country's budget is like a company's budget, like the budget of an individual. So it's basically to lay out what your plans are, what the country's plans are for the coming year. It's always 1 year, financial year.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be a calendar. It doesn't have to coincide with the calendar year. Right? Different countries have got different financial years. So what the government plans to do in terms of how much revenue it expects to collect, and then from that revenue, how is it going to spend in for the next 12 months? And usually it will go more than the 12 months. So that very simple, a very simple explanation is what a budget is. And then there are three types of budgets. One can be a balanced budget where your the revenue that the government receives equals the spending of the government. So it's balanced. The other type of budget is known as a surplus budget, where what the government receives is more than what the government spends. And then the other one is a deficit budget, where what the government receives in terms of your taxes, dividend from Petronas is not enough to cover the spending. So that's a deficit budget, right? And in Malaysia's case, 2023 is projecting a deficit budget as well. Uh, the government is projecting at about 5% of GDP, right? That is down from about 6.4% in the last 2 years. Malaysia's budget, through since independence, since 1957, Malaysia's budget has most of the time been in deficit. Yeah. Uh, the question is whether a budget is good, whether a budget deficit is good or bad. It cannot be answered alone. Now, if a budget deficit is really big, like say 10%, 15%, 20%, then by all accounts that is bad. That is dangerous. That is very risky. But when the budget deficit is like 1 or 2%, then uh, it depends on your external current account position. It depends on your inflation environment and your GDP growth and a whole host of other things. But generally, a budget deficit of 1 or 2% is tolerable. Yeah, generally speaking. Now, when it gets to be a bit more tricky, is like where we are now, right? When it hits 4%, 5%, 6%, 7%, that gets into a level where if the government doesn't manage it well, then becomes then the economy can go down into a very dangerous direction, right? Now, in our case, meaning Malaysia's case, the current deficit is about 5-6%. On its own, it should be lower, but there has to be seen in the context. If you look at throughout the world,
Yeah.
because of the pandemic in the last 3 years, every country has got a budget deficit. Well, not every, almost every country, right? Almost like 99% has got a budget deficit. Even countries that are traditionally enjoying budget surplus like Singapore has also gone into budget deficit. So if you take the global economy into account, then the budget deficit that Malaysia is facing in the last few years is nothing unusual. So is 5-6% acceptable? Uh, Looking at the budget deficit on its own is not useful. You have to look at political stability. If you have political stability, it means you have a government, the same government, and the government is responsible. Then, of course, the government will reduce the budget deficit gradually, right? But if you have political instability, where the government keeps changing and they want to reduce the budget and they cannot achieve that, then a 5-6% deficit becomes worrying because you know if you have political instability, right, and the governments keep changing. So how does the government win votes? By spending more money, right? By giving more bonuses, wage increase, more subsidies. But when you do that, then your budget deficit will worsen. Right? So political instability, when you already have a high deficit of 5-6%, then it doesn't give the country any flexibility, any room to maneuver. Should there be political changes, or should the global economy worsen? The Your options for you to increase your spending and so on would be very, very narrow, right? So I'm giving a big picture first, the context of the 5-6% budget deficit where we are, and also 2023 this year, the global economic outlook is extremely uncertain. You have Europe and US that are supposed to be heading into a recession. They are not, but should investors be assured by that? Not necessary, because if you look at US, the job market is still very strong, inflation is still high. The same thing for Europe. UK still has got double-digit inflation, so which means interest rate, monetary tightening in those countries have not gone enough to bring inflation down. So, in other words, in the next few quarters in 2023, most likely you see interest rates in Europe, in US, UK going up much further, which interest rate cannot keep on going. It cannot keep going up without affecting the economy, right? Up by the time it reaches a certain level, the interest rate will affect consumer demand and therefore go into recession. So most likely, in the case of US, you might see that happening towards the second half of this year. Now, on the positive side, you have the reopening of China, which will boost demand globally, especially for the ASEAN market, especially for an economy like Malaysia. So, on a net basis, 2023 is economy-wise, global economy is going to be very uncertain. So, if the government manages it responsibly, then they have to take this into account in presenting the 2023 budget, right? So, projected budget deficit of 5%, uh, I guess is as prudent as the government can be, lah. Because on the other hand, you cannot reduce spending too much. If you reduce spending too much, then there's a big segment of the economy that be affected by the increase in cost of living, right? But if you spend too much, yes, you help most Malaysians, but then your budget deficit would go to a dangerous level. So uh, you're looking at maybe the room for the government to maneuver is like maybe instead of projecting 5%, maybe 4%. So it's very narrow. There's very little room for flexibility to maneuver, right? So if you think that the budget deficit can be projected to go down to say 2%, then that is too drastic. Or if you think that, I'm going to have six state elections this year, right? Selangor, Penang, Kelantan, Terengganu, right? So I'm going to spend more and increase the budget deficit to 7, 8, 9%. That is irresponsible. So looking at it overall, I mean, if I were to be the finance minister, obviously I'm not the finance minister. I think this is a very difficult balancing act to achieve. Right? You got two very on the negative side, very a lot of uncertainties. On the positive side, also very few positive. Basically, the positive is the opening up of China. That's about the only positive you can think of from the economy point of view, right? So then how would it affect Malaysia's economy? How would it affect the budget? In 2022, last year, Malaysia's economy expanded at a very impressive rate. I mean, we haven't expanded at this 8 9% for a long time. But it's not just Malaysia. Many other countries also achieved a very strong GDP growth in 2022, right? Because of a few reasons. But 2023, Malaysia, Singapore, and all that will see a major slowdown, right? And I mean, some people have forecast that Malaysia's GDP may be 4% and so on. I think what the actual result will turn out to be is really uncertain. The key thing is not to focus on the projection, whether it's 4%, 3%, 5%. That's not so important. The key angle that investors should focus on is the uncertainty of your forecast, right? That means if you forecast 4%, how sure are you that it's going to be 4%? So the uncertainty is very high. Yeah. And that's on the GDP outlook for Malaysia, right? For the uh, Bursa Malaysia, it's not just looking at the Malaysian's economy, uh, because we are a very open economy, we export a lot. So what happens to the rest of the world affects us a lot. And the key thing that I'm more concerned with is not so much Malaysia's budget because, like I said, there's so much only the government can do. You don't have that many options to deal with in the first place, right? So the key thing that mm, concerns me more is U.S. inflation. It is still very high, and there are signs that it could even start to rise again, right? Now the U.S. the 10-year, I talked about this previously, the 10-year government bond yield in US, it went up above 4%, right? Should it continue to rise further, then I am pretty certain the NY Nasdaq would collapse and the US economy would go into recession. That would have, I think, a big impact, whether it's psychological in terms of sentiment or whether it will affect the at the real economy level. I think that's something investors should be paying more attention to. Now, if I take that into account, because like I said, I'm worried about U.S. inflation. The U.S. economy is still overheating, and I see U.S. interest rates going up a lot more. So most likely, this budget that we have announced, that the government, the finance minister announced just a few days ago, may not be enough to cushion that impact. Right? So if you ask me from a market timing, market forecasting, right, question, then I would imagine that the KLCI, Bursa Malaysia, would still be under uh, selling pressure, under the trend will still be on the bearish side rather than on the bullish side. Yeah, I mean that's I look at it from a global approach, top down, and then from a Malaysian approach. Yeah, and the other questions that investors want to ask is what sectors and all that. You know, if you look at the details of the budget, uh, you can only do very tiny changes. Like income tax rate is cut by 0.5%, 1%. So at the consumer level, it's better than no cut. But will it lead to Me spending more? No. So I think the a global in the case of a real serious global slowdown, the budget might not be able to uh, offset much of that negative impact. So overall, I would imagine that the earnings, the corporate earnings for Malaysian companies, right, will still be under pressure lah. Oil price is not doing that well. Crude oil price, CPO should be already bottom out. But then look at the semiconductor side, the tech side, they're under a lot of pressure because the semiconductor industry is still global semiconductor industry is still contracting. So corporate earnings as a whole, uh, I don't see any strong. I mean, I don't see strong growth in corporate earnings. If not, you might even, if you are unlucky, you might even see negative growth for corporate earnings, right? So if that's the case, Malaysia's interest rate is unlikely to go down. In fact, it might even go up a little bit more because US interest rates cannot come down. US interest rates go up. If US interest rates go up and our Malaysian interest rates does not go up, then the ringgit is going to weaken. Now, if the ringgit weakens, then it's going to add in a lot of cost pressure, right? And then, if you notice, the government has already announced that chicken and eggs will not have any more fixed price, no more selling price. That is good and bad.
Yeah.
Good in the sense that you will not have shortages. Bad in the sense that suddenly consumers have to adjust to higher chicken and higher egg prices, which will eat into your cost of living pressure, right? So US interest rates going up, Malaysian interest rates, I think has to still go up at least one or two times. Otherwise, the ringgit will suffer, right? So overall, I don't feel confident that the budget would be able to offset the negative pressures coming from overseas, right? And if you want to go down to details, where the government talk about uh, expanding the Penang airport and the Subang airport, that would be good for companies like Capital A, like Asia, because the KLIA has got a lot of limitations, and Penang can be a northern hub, right? And Subang, especially for those of us who are living in Klang Valley, if I can travel to Vietnam or Indonesia from Subang instead of KLIA, definitely is much more convenient. But the expansion of Subang and Penang is going to be over the next 2 to 3 years, not immediate, right?
Yeah.
And then the other major highlight of the budget is the EV, lah, where the government extended for CBU and CKD EVs, right? Gave the concession for another 2 years. I think because to develop the Malaysia's government idea is to attract the people like Tesla or whoever it is to come and set up their base in Malaysia. And to do that, I think Malaysia should have mapped out a longer term strategy, not just to extend the concession for by just 2 years. I mean, if I'm Tesla, okay, like 2 years, now I can bring in my Tesla, I can export my Tesla into Malaysia. I start up a certain number of fast charging stations in Malaysia. But why should I start up a gigafactory in Malaysia? Because to sell a gigafactory, I need to be able to sell like 300,000, 400,000 EVs, right? So maybe the new government hasn't got the time yet because they're only in government only 100 days, or maybe the new government hasn't got the talent, the people to map out a long-term strategy to attract this type of very important investments. But that was a bit disappointing, right? But nevertheless, if you look at specific stock, then if you want specific picks, Capital A will be on the tourist side, on the airport side. Tourist side is interesting because the tourism industry, because of the reopening of China, is more recession proof, especially for the markets that capital A is serving. Basically, they're serving ASEAN and China, right? And the recession that we see is going to be more Europe, UK, and US. So it doesn't really affect uh, a company like Capital A because the tourists, the traffic, if you read the flights from KL to Shanghai, Shanghai to KL to Shanghai, and KL to the other Chengdu, I think, the plane is full, it's 100%, and they're going to increase the frequency. So that is quite uh, resilient to the recession in the Western economies. So I think of all the airlines, Capital A is very well positioned. Of course, you may say, I want maybe to invest in Malaysia Airport, but Malaysia Airport has done a very bad job. You look at the Aero train between the main terminal and the satellite terminal in KLIA, the aerotrain keeps breaking
Yeah,
down, right?
yeah,
You see in social
yeah,
media, right? People
yeah.
got to come down from the train and walk on the track in the rain. Malaysia Airport has done a hopeless job. So they are in a monopoly position because all the airlines got to fly through the airports,
Yeah.
but I don't like the stock because it's so badly managed when they could have done a much better job and benefit the whole country, right? Or if you look at the auto side, in the auto industry, the EV side, I think the company which there are a few. You got BMW, you got B Auto, Burma's Auto, MBMR. I think the one that I like the most is MBMR, MBM Resources. They have under them Federal Auto, which is handling Volkswagen and Volvo. Right? Volvo has really said that uh, a few years from now, I cannot remember exactly what year. I think 2025. They say that they're not going to produce any more internal combustion engine. They're going to produce only EVs, and the distributor of Volvo in Malaysia is Federal Auto, which is under MBMR. And Volkswagen is also very strong into electric vehicles, right? Whereas if you look at BMW, which is basically Toyota, I mean, I'm not sure if most people are aware, because Toyota is very far behind. They started with Toyota Prius, which is a hybrid, many years before any other auto company did, but they lost the advantage that they have.
Yeah.
So they don't really have a competitive EV to sell, right? So if the government, I mean, I hope that the Malaysian government really, whether it's this government or future government, really emphasize and push and promote EVs because, uh, I mean, those of you who have not driven an EV, who have not sat down and drive an EV, you cannot appreciate the advantage. I've tested many. I've tested Tesla. I've tested Neo in China, Tesla in US. Once you sit in an electric vehicle, you don't want to go back to the ICE, the internal combustion engine car anymore. First thing, the electric vehicle, peaceful, silent, no sound, very enjoyable. Second thing, the space inside is spacious because you don't have all the gearbox
Yeah.
transmission and so on and so forth. Very spacious. Third thing, you have very good acceleration. In terms of accelerating and in terms of decelerating, it's much better than the internal combustion engine. Fourth thing is the maintenance of the car because there's so few parts, not like the traditional car. There's so few parts, right? So if you want to do a service, certain service can be done what is known as over the air. In other words, you get your car, which is actually like a mobile phone, get connected to Tesla, and Tesla will send the upgrade through the internet. Upgrade your software,
Yeah.
right? Upgrade and service your car, so you don't have to send to a mechanic,
Ah.
right? Uh, I mean that's incredible, and of course, the one good thing is that it doesn't. I mean, Malaysian drivers, whether it's lorry drivers, taxi drivers, private car drivers, have this very bad habit. They will while waiting, they will let the car engine run.
Ah.
Next time when you go shopping, when you go around 6 o'clock anywhere, you see this taxi
Yeah.
driver let the diesel run and so on and so forth. Uh, that is obviously very bad for the environment,
Environment.
right?
Yeah.
And if you think that that's no big deal, then you ask yourself, now it's March, right? It's really March, right?
Yeah.
When have you ever heard of Johor being flooded in March, right?
Mm.
Serious, you're not talking about flash flood, you're talking about serious flooding. 3 people died in Johor because of floods in at the end of February, early March. It's unheard of. It is climate change. So this lorry driver, this taxi, this grab driver, this passenger driver who is leaving his engine on running is contributing to the flood. But in the case of EV, you don't have that. So coming back to my point, you know, so if Malaysian government can really promote EV, that would be a great achievement. It will lead to a much better environment in terms of chemical pollution, in terms of noise. There's a lot of noise pollution, and life quality of life will be much better. So, among the stocks I mentioned, I think MBMR would have a good portfolio of brands to benefit from this opening up. Can or not?
Yeah.
Can. So maybe do any comments, any
Like we
question?
got some comments from the audience, and one of them mentioned that from
Hmm.
YouTube,
Hmm.
Paul.
Hmm.
Hi, Mr. Tan. Will Capital Dynamics Global Fund invest in Tesla? Like, is this now a
Hmm.
good timing?
Okay, good question. I personally started researching on Tesla as far back as 2012, 10 years ago. We wanted to see them many, many times. In those early years, 2012 to 2017, we tried many times. We wrote to them. We even asked our global stockbroker, which is a global investment bank. We thought that they have better contacts and see whether they can arrange meetings with the people in Tesla.
Yeah.
They couldn't. In those early years, in the first 5 years, Tesla's uh, was focusing on production, and they were very when it comes to meeting investors or analysts or fund managers like us, they were totally chaotic. There's no one handling it. So I finally got to see them. At that time, Tesla's price was like before all the stock split, there was only about 10 or 15 US dollars. Right? If I bought in that year,
Mm-hmm.
I would have made or the fund will make a lot of money. Then I finally got to see Tesla in California in the Fremont headquarters in 2019.
Oh.
I tested Tesla, went to see their factories and so on. Uh, but to answer your question, I was unlucky. I've been unlucky with Tesla. 2012 to 2017, never got a chance to talk to them and ask them. 2019, finally, after 7 years, I got to see them. But after I saw them, 1 week after I saw them, they came up with a very bullish news. So the stock price jumped up a lot.
Mm.
Now, by the second week, they came out with another positive news. I think that time was that the Shanghai factory opened ahead of schedule. So the stock price jumped up a lot again.
Yeah.
Then, before end of the year, I think by end December or early January, Tesla announced the third positive news. I think it was like their sales were much better, or their earnings were much better, something like that.
Mm.
And the stock price just went crazy. So, to answer Paul's question, I think I'm not fated. You know, Chinese has this term, yan fen, which is fate, right? I'm not fated to buy Tesla shares
Mm.
because I've tried so hard.
Yeah.
I think I'm the only Malaysian fund manager who has ever visited Tesla's factories in Fremont. And I've tested Model S, I've tested Model 3, and even drove Tesla on the California highway
Mm.
purposely because their models are semi-autonomous. So what we did was we took our hand off the steering wheel,
Oh.
yeah, and the car drove by itself. Now that was on a straight expressway.
Yeah.
And then there were many curves coming ahead, so we were a bit scared because you've never sat in an autonomous car
Yeah.
before. I don't want to die.
Yeah.
So then we put our hands. The hand was still not on the steering, but very close to the steering wheel. Right. And the best part was The car drove, navigated the big curves left and right perfectly. So that's why I'm so convinced with EVs.
Mm.
Yeah. And answer Paul's question, would I buy it now? Uh, it's dropped a lot. After 2019, it's skyrocketed. Then it peaked, I think, in 2020 or 2021, and plunged. But it's still much higher than the price that I saw in 2019.
Mm.
So would I buy now? That is a lot more difficult now because at that time, Elon Musk did not buy Twitter. He wasn't managing Twitter. Now Elon Musk has got SpaceX, Tesla, and Twitter. And
Yeah.
Twitter is undergoing a lot of restructuring, right? So I'm not sure whether Elon Musk is. I mean, all of us got 24 hours,
Yeah.
and Elon Musk, I really respect him a lot. In a way, he's like my role model, is like my hero. He deserves a lot of respect, and he's achieved really a lot. So I respect him a lot. But all of us got 24 hours. Can he manage? If Twitter
Mm.
is running smoothly,
Yeah.
like Alphabet, Google, fine. But it's facing a lot of competition and restructuring. Same thing with Tesla. Now in Tesla, in US EV, Tesla is the king. But behind Tesla, there are a few like General Motors, Ford, which are coming up,
Mm-mm.
right? And then in China, Tesla has got a lot of fierce competitors. In fact, Elon Musk himself said that the next Tesla will come from China because it says the EV companies in China are world standards. So at this point in time, I would need to wait and see how the industry landscape plays out. Yeah, because it's become since 2019, it's become a lot more competitive.
Okay, so like the next question from
Mm,
YouTube,
mm,
Alex,
mm.
the tax incentive given to technology sector, this will be good for MNC company come here to invest.
Hmm. Yes, not. Uh, I don't see it as a. It's not a negative, but I don't see it as a major positive.
Mm.
I mean, if you look at because I like to use the word technology in a very broad sense. If you look at, say, for example, the EV side, uh, what Tesla is going to set up is just a Scindian hard that's just going to do importing and so on and so forth. Tesla is not going to set up a gigafactory. So, to use the example of Tesla to convince them to set up a gigafactory, don't forget Malaysia has to compete with Indonesia. Indonesia has got the advantage of having lithium, all the minerals that goes into making an EV battery, right? Plus a super big domestic market, plus a government whereby it is so political stability in Indonesia is so much better than Malaysia. You have Jokowi, President Jokowi. Actually, he himself personally invited Elon Musk to invest in Indonesia. What have we done? We have got changes in prime ministers.
Yeah.
All right. So, like I said, overall, it's not negative, but to attract the technology companies, whether it's EV, whether it's semiconductors, whether it's solar energy, renewable, we are very far behind. We have a long way to go. In terms, it's not just the incentive, but in terms of the manpower, we don't have the skilled labor.
Sure. Next comment from Alex.
Okay, same Alex.
Yeah,
Okay,
beside MBMR, how about EV related in China?
okay. Well, this is Malaysian budget. This is not China's budget. uh, I mean, for those of you who have followed me in the past, China, you have a lot of EV makers there. The largest BYD. Then you have the Li Auto, the Neo, the Xpeng, right? And a few other traditional automakers that are also coming into the EV space. Among all of them, I still prefer Xpeng. Xpeng because their portfolio, they got the cheaper type, the mass market type, they got the mass premium, and very advanced in developing their autonomous vehicle. So in China, I think the EV there is expand. But I mean, it's a very the EV market is a very dynamic market. There are a lot of startups, and many of them will last 2 years, 3 years, and then they close shop. And the important thing is to be able to understand the strategy of that particular company, because ultimately it will determine whether the technology in a way is already open source in the sense that it's available, right? But how do you produce it in the most timely manner, in the most cost effective manner, and to be able to produce the models at the right price that the consumers want? That is very tricky. Very tricky.
Okay, so from Facebook, from Vince, other than war, what are the likely factors that could trigger the world economy into recession in second half year?
Okay. Okay. I thought we were talking about the budget, but I think our 2023 budget did not budget for a war. uh, I don't call it a war. I call it a crisis. I think he's referring to the Ukrainian situation,
Yeah.
right? And well, first thing is, will the Ukrainian crisis escalate? Will it worsen or will it improve? Uh, it's a tough question. I think if more people in the rest of the world, then the rest of the world mean people outside the West, outside Canada, outside US, outside Europe, outside Britain, outside Australia, if the people outside and outside Japan, if the rest of the world, which is about 6 billion people, can make their voices heard louder, shout louder, that look, it is not Russia that is at fault, it is America that is being arrogant. You look, China presented their position. Well, it's called a peace plan, right? But actually, it's just a position paper of the Chinese government. Look, the Chinese government says, look, we want peace. What did Europe, what did US say? Oh, cannot work, it cannot work. Immediately they say cannot work. So what? You're telling me that sending the Leopard tanks to Ukraine will work? Sending your Abrams tank to Ukraine will work? So previously the World War, the WWF, World War Fund, right? When they have this slogan, this is when the buying stop, the killing stops, right? In this case, in the Ukraine, when you stop sending the weapons and all those financial aid, then the crisis will stop. So I think the question of whether the crisis will become a war, a lot depends on America and nobody else. Because Putin, to be fair to him, has stated his position very clearly. I don't want NATO to expand into Ukraine. You can expand anywhere else in the world, but don't expand to Ukraine because Ukraine is next to my border and is very close to Moscow. And then you can send your missiles from Ukraine into my Russia anytime you want to. So my conditions, the conditions of Russia are very clear. So why can't America tell NATO don't expand to Ukraine? You are not in Ukraine, so why are you so greedy? Why is America so greedy? Why is NATO so greedy? You want to expand to Ukraine, you want to expand to Sweden, you want to expand to Finland, and now you want to expand to Asia. You want to invite Korea and Japan to be part of NATO. You want to create a world war. So if the rest of the world can tell America, for heaven's sake, have a culture of peace, don't have a culture of war. You're always fighting with people. You're fighting with people all over the world. And then you can blame other people. So I think people like us should tell America, come on, don't be so bloody arrogant. That's nothing to do with the question that he asked. His question was, what if the war breaks out? So make sure that the war doesn't break out. But if the war breaks out, then gosh, the last time, First World War, Second World War, they call it World War. If you look at First War, Second War, it's not a World War. It's actually the European wars. It's actually the wars of the imperial powers because we are colonies of Britain. Malaya was a colony of Britain. Singapore was a colony of Britain. India was a colony of Britain. We were dragged into this European and American war, the imperial war. It was not a world war, but should the Ukraine crisis get out of hand, right? Whereby I don't know whether who is going to use nuclear weapons, I do not know, or it would be great if Americans send their soldiers there, send to Ukraine and let the American soldiers die. Because why did America withdraw from Afghanistan? Why did America withdraw from Iraq? Why did America lost the Vietnam War? Because too many American soldiers died. And every time the American soldiers died, they had to bring them back to America in their military plane in the coffin with the American flag. And the TV will focus, the media will focus, show live. Wow, you mean so many American soldiers died? And then I say, okay, let's not fight.
Yeah.
So should there be a war? Uh, First thing is, if you look at the history, when there's a big major war, I'm talking about First World War, Second World War, the stock markets generally don't go down. Yeah, it's very ironical
Yeah.
because first thing is people are distracted. Like people are focused on fighting the war. People don't focus on what stocks to buy,
Yeah.
right? And then whether you have budget deficit, people don't bother because you need to have budget deficit and interest rate inflation are all gone because during wartime, I'm talking about World War, there'll be price controls. There cannot be a free market mechanism where prices can go up. So inflation is gone, interest rates cannot go up. So you just focus on war, and the stock market is very peaceful. And then after a certain time, investors will start focusing on recovery.
Mm.
Right? Look at Ukraine now. The American companies, many of them are really their saliva coming out because they're looking at reconstructing Ukraine. Imagine how many billions of contracts they can have, to build the apartments, to build the infrastructure, and then the earnings will go up. So investors in the stock market will start focusing on the recovery, the benefits of the reconstructions of the recovery. So the answer to his question, how would of course initially in the first uh, initial period could be weeks or months. In the initial period there'll be a lot of panic, definitely because there'll be a lot of uncertainty. People do not know how it's going to unfold and what will happen, right? But after that, when people find that either side is also losing a lot of soldiers and so on, and then eventually the war will end sometime, then the market will stabilize. That's based on the past pattern. This time, I do not know who will be the first country that will use nuclear weapon. Right? Of all the nuclear powers, only India and China,
Mm.
only two countries, India and China, have made it publicly their policy that they will not be the first country to use nuclear weapons.
Mm.
But the rest, France, Russia, America, no. They are more than happy to be the first to use it.
Okay, so next question from NK Go. Mr. Tan, good morning. Which industry or company in Malaysia will benefit from EV theme?
Uh, Unfortunately, not many. I would think almost none.
Mm.
Right? It's very different from other countries, particularly like Indonesia or China. In Malaysia's case, we are starting from a very, very low base, almost zero. And then even with the Teslas coming to import their cars, uh, the cars are going to be imported from. It's not going to be the exemption that the government has given Tesla is this: they don't need to have a local company holding the AP permit, the approved permit. The Tesla Sendirian Berhad Malaysia can do the importing already. So when they import, I don't think there's any company that's going to benefit, any Malaysian company that's going to benefit from it. And when they bring the fast charging stations, it has to come from US. I don't think it's going to benefit Malaysian
Mm.
companies, and it's not going to be huge number of fast charging stations. It's only be in the hundreds and a few thousand. So it's not the impact is not that big. I
I
think the greatest
see.
benefit will be when we're able to scale up when the government has got a long-term plan that okay, by say 5, 10 years from now, Malaysia wants to have. Now we sell about 4 to 500,000 cars a year, right? So Malaysia will set a target that in 5 years' time, 80% of the car sold has to be EV. Then you can imagine 3 to 400,000 EVs car. Then a lot of companies can benefit.
Last question. Hi, Mr. Tan. Can you provide your view on semicon chip company like TSMC, AMD?
Eh, TSMC, if you notice, Warren Buffett bought and then very quickly sold TSMC. Uh, I think the semiconductor industry globally is facing a very unusual cycle. Overall, it is declining, it's contracting. It's declining very rapidly, right? But different segments are still not doing too badly. For example, NVIDIA, right? Was it NVIDIA? I think it's NVIDIA, not Broadcom. NVIDIA. NVIDIA that seems to be benefiting from this new craze over ChatGPT, right? Because to have the able to do the companies to be able to allow chat gpt with ai, you need certain type of chips, which nvidia seems to be in a good position to take advantage of, right? But then on the other hand, it's interesting because one company like HP Enterprises, which make computers, right, announced good results. And then Marvel Technology, we make semiconductor in another segment of the semicon industry, announced bad results. So it's a very bifurcated, very uh, there are a lot of segments, sub-segments within the semicon industry that some parts are doing well, some parts are holding up well. So the TSMC, I would, if you want to use the market terminology, I would just wait and see, because whether it's AMD or TSMC, the tech sector as a whole is very sensitive to US interest rates, and I see US interest rates still going higher. If that's the case, then I think generally the tech sector will still be under selling pressure.
Thank you, Mr. Tan, for your answers.
Well, I mean, this is just my views. I can still get it wrong, but for those who want to have this sort of regular research and opinions and all that, I think can subscribe to our
Yeah, newsletter.
iCapital.biz, our newsletter, only 49 ringgit a year for digital. And if you want print and digital, it's only 99 ringgit a year. And you get weekly, the print edition is on a weekly basis, and the internet edition is updated every day.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of contents inside there. Yeah.
Okay,
And to the audience outside there, please send in your questions. This budget question was also suggested by some of our followers, so please send in your suggestions, and then we will discuss this live.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for watching and enjoying this live. Again, don't forget to follow us on social media, like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss our latest updates. If you have any suggestions for the topics we should cover in our upcoming Facebook Live, please do let us know. We will meet again next week. Happy weekend, everyone. Thank you
Okay.
for
Right.
watching.
Bye bye.